In 1916, the world of carnival wrestling was still far from what we would one day know as sports entertainment. Everything was hard, raw, and driven by ego. There was no protection, no safety net, and no room for the weak, whether inside the ring or behind the curtain. At that time, a wrestler's reputation meant everything. There was no television, no major promotions, not even long-term contracts. All they had was their name, a name carried from one town to the next. A wrestler's value was measured by one simple question: could he truly defeat his opponent? Losing, especially losing quickly, was often seen as disgraceful. A name could collapse, bookings would stop, pay would drop, and a career could quietly disappear. From this world came a survival mentality: better to wrestle cautiously for hours than to lose in 10 minutes. Wrestlers worked defensively, locking their opponents down and holding grips for as long as possible. One mistake could mean defeat, and if your reputation fell, your future went down with it. Submission wrestling in that era was not entertainment. If your ankle was trapped in a toe hold or your arm wrenched in a hammerlock, the joint could be permanently damaged. There were no dramatic rope breaks, no referee stoppages for safety like today. Because of that, the most important skill wasn't simply attacking but surviving and escaping. And it was in this harsh environment that Toots Mont was shaped. Mont took part in real, brutal shoot matches. Wrestling for 1 or 2 hours was normal, sometimes even 3. Both wrestlers waited each other out, draining stamina minute by minute. For the young Mont, this was not just a physical trial, but a mental one as well. He learned that wrestling wasn't only about strength, it was about patience, discipline, and endurance under relentless pressure. But the dark side of this world couldn't be avoided. At that time, there were no clear tap-out rules. If someone submitted too late, a shoulder could be dislocated, an elbow permanently damaged, or knee ligaments torn apart. Some wrestlers were forced to retire young. Others lived the rest of their lives with injuries. Mont saw all of this up close. Veteran carnival wrestlers began teaching him how to protect himself, not only formal techniques, but little tricks for survival. Pressure on the jaw to break concentration, driving the head downward in a headlock to restrict breathing, or grinding the shin bone into the ribs to create pain without being obvious. In those days, these things weren't seen as cheating, they were strategy. Behind the ring, Mont also saw how the politics worked. Popular wrestlers had leverage over promoters. Promoters feared losing their stars to another town. There were no long-term contracts, no absolute loyalty. Everything revolved around economic interest. This meant wrestlers rarely fully trusted one another. Even when a result had already been agreed upon, there was always the chance someone would suddenly turn it into a shoot mid-match. Ego, reputation, and money walked hand in hand, and Mont learned that technical skill alone was not enough to survive in this world. Many matches were also surrounded by gambling. Spectators bet on results, on match duration, even on the chance of a fall. In some cases, bookmakers were connected to promoters. This added yet another layer of pressure. Mont realized that what happened inside the ring was often tied to unseen currents of money outside it. From all these experiences, Mont understood that a wrestler needed to be strong but also smart. He had to know when to push himself and when to play safe, because one wrong decision could destroy not only a reputation but an entire future. At the same time, he trained under Martin Farmer Burns. Burns was more than a coach. He was a mentor who taught wrestling as a science of the human body. Under Burns, wrestling was understood as a fusion of technique, control, and logic, and he stressed one principle above all: survival matters more than looking heroic. Training at Burns camp was harsh and realistic. Sparring was done seriously. Many students went home covered in bruises, and Mont was right in the middle of it. He learned to stay calm when his arm was twisted, to move with the pressure to avoid injury, then reverse the hold into an advantage. He trained escapes from toe holds and ankle locks that could snap a joint at any moment. And from this training emerged a pattern that would one day define modern wrestling: headlock, hip toss, then slam. Little by little, Mont came to understand something important. Wrestling was not only about winning or losing, What mattered more was ensuring a wrestler could still step into the ring again tomorrow. Mont also began to realize that behind everything, there was a flow of money and interests that the audience could not always see. He saw firsthand how gambling could influence the course of a match. There were nights when a wrestler was asked to slow the pace so betting patterns would stay active. There were also times when someone was asked to lose purely for the benefit of certain parties. But the culture of protecting one's reputation meant many wrestlers refused to cooperate. They didn't want their name damaged just to serve someone else's interests, and when ego, money, and distrust collided in the ring, a match that had been carefully planned could suddenly turn into a real fight. Slowly, Mont reached an important realization. The outcome of a match was not always determined by pure ability inside the ring. Very often, what mattered more was who controlled the economics behind the curtain. The old system looked heroic, but it was exhausting. Matches were too long, too punishing, and eventually they bored the audience. If wrestling was meant to be entertainment, Mont thought, then there had to be a way to keep it intense without destroying each other's bodies every night. Realism was still important, but there needed to be rhythm. There needed to be drama. There needed to be structure. His long experience on the Carnival circuit shaped Mont, not only as a wrestler, but as a thinker of the ring. He saw that the audience didn't just want to know who would win. They wanted to feel tension. They wanted to see escapes from holds, counters, shifts in momentum, things that made their emotions rise and fall throughout the match. From here, an idea began to grow. Wrestling did not have to be a never-ending war of attrition. He imagined a form of performance that was still tough, still convincing, but now directed. Every move had a purpose. Every moment was built to create a reaction. For Mont, the formula was simple. If the audience was satisfied, tickets would sell. If tickets sold, promoters made money. And if promoters made money, the wrestlers could live better. At this point, Mont began to understand the three great pillars of the wrestling industry: audience psychology, business economics, and the value of entertainment. From here, his awareness fully formed. Wrestling did not have to remain trapped between ego, gambling interests, and directionless violence. Wrestling could become a performance, a form of entertainment that was still strong, still intense, but now had a soul. However, when Mont began bringing this new way of thinking into the ring, not everyone was ready to accept it. In 1917, the world of professional wrestling felt the shockwaves of World War I. Many wrestlers were drafted into the military, leaving the ring behind for a uniform. As a result, rosters across the country began to thin out. Big names that once filled the posters slowly disappeared, and promoters were forced to improvise just to keep their shows alive. The economic situation was no easier. Not everyone had the money or even the mood to watch wrestling. Tickets didn't always sell, and many promoters simply hoped to cover the arena rent and pay the few wrestlers they still had. The matches continued, but the atmosphere was no longer the same. In the middle of all this, Toots Mont was wrestling more than ever, but not every opponent was willing to cooperate. Many wrestlers still lived by the old philosophy: never lose no matter the cost. Matches that were supposed to run smoothly sometimes turned into real fights, simply because a wrestler refused to follow even the simplest in-ring agreement. At the same time, some promoters quietly began fixing match results to protect storylines and business. But this created an ethical conflict. Some wrestlers still believed that victory should come purely from ability. Wrestling was in a transitional era, part sport, part entertainment, with the industry torn between tradition and evolution. Caught in the middle of this struggle, Mont began to experiment. He changed the tempo. He didn't rely only on long holds and mat control. He added big slams, sudden bursts of action, and dramatic moments designed to make the crowd react. He learned how to take opponents down safely, while still making it look brutal to the audience. For the first time, the rhythm of a match began to feel like a performance, not just a fight. And the crowd noticed. Every big move drew louder cheers. Young fans began copying the moves they saw. This new style spoke a different language: from catch wrestling. Mont kept the techniques and transitions from the frontier spirit. He absorbed raw aggression, then he wrapped it all in high-impact throws and fast pacing. The result was a form of physical entertainment, unlike anything before it. But not everyone welcomed the change. Many traditional technical wrestlers saw Mont's style as a threat to the purity of wrestling. Locker rooms slowly divided into two camps, those loyal to the old ways and those who saw the future in speed and drama. The tension rarely exploded, but it was enough to show that the industry stood at a crossroads. During this period, Mont became increasingly involved in structured work matches. He began studying ring psychology, when to slow down, when to build tension, and when to deliver the one big moment that made the audience rise to their feet. Promoters noticed whenever there was drama, character, and fast pacing, ticket sales went up. The audience didn't just want to know who was stronger, they wanted to feel a story. From this shift, a new role emerged, the booker. Someone who didn't just decide who wrestled who but shaped how the match unfolded and how the story evolved. Slowly, Mont was invited into this inner circle. He was no longer just a wrestler, he became an architect of the show. And it was here that his philosophy fully matured. For Mont, booking wasn't just about choosing winners. Booking meant controlling the flow of money. Booking meant shaping the narrative. Booking meant guiding the entire business. Eventually, Mont reached one major conclusion. Professional wrestling didn't have to be trapped between ego, gambling interests, and long, punishing shoot-style matches. It could become a form of physical theater, still intense and convincing, but now with structure, rhythm, and purpose. At a time when the wrestling world was searching for direction, Billy Sandow rose as a major force in the business. He wasn't just a manager, he was a sharp businessman. Under his guidance, Ed Strangler Lewis became one of the biggest stars in wrestling. Together, they built a new foundation of power within the industry. But there was still one missing piece. They needed someone who truly understood how to shape the performance inside the ring, and that was Toots Mont. Mont brought something fresh, high tempo, big impact, and match structure built to keep audiences emotionally invested. Sandow saw the business potential. Lewis saw how this style could strengthen his dominance as the top star. From there, the three began working together. Sandow controlled the business. Lewis ruled inside the ring. Mont engineered the show itself. And slowly, an alliance was born. An alliance that would come to be known as the Gold Dust Trio, a force that didn't just change how wrestling was performed, but reshaped the future of professional wrestling forever.